Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live recording of the Young Screenwriters podcast. I'm obviously joined here today by two very special guests, and we are going to get started in about 3 minutes. We're just going to give some people some time to trickle in, and we're just going to hang out for a little bit. So, how are both of you?
I'm amazing. Yeah, this is our.
Obviously.
I went to bed at like 6 p.m. and I woke up at midnight, and I've had a very long, full, adventurous day. So
That's funny. That's the
yeah,
exact pattern my daughter took last night, and she's 12 weeks old. So
yeah,
you guys are in sync.
There you go, Danny and
that's what I
your
would.
12-week
Danny
daughter.
and Vita. Danny and Vita.
Yeah, and we both treat you probably like with the same amount of like rationale and respect, just screaming at you and whining all the time.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
yeah,
It's good.
yeah.
So we're
Yeah,
doing great.
how are you,
Hmm?
I'm very excited to be here. Danny's excited to be here. We're excited to talk Billy Elliot. Like, OMG. Man, it was so fun to watch that movie again.
I know. I forgot how good it was. Like, I was like
It's good. It's
over
good.
there getting emotional. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why is this happening?
It's nice to have like a midweek cry fest. I feel like forging unexpectedly really is cathartic. It's just a really touching film.
And the actress is Molly Weasley, right? Like, I was like, I know you. I think she is. I need to look it up.
Yes. No, of course. Yeah.
I have to know.
I know she won the Academy Award. I believe she won the Oscar that year, I think. Or maybe I could be mistaken.
Let's see.
I'm talking about the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was fantastic. I'm pretty sure
she was awesome.
I think she won the Oscar that year, but
yeah, she was Molly Weasley. I'm not crazy. I was like, why do I know her face? And apparently that's why. So it was
weird. A few years ago. I had a Billy Elliot fan moment. So I was I was at CAA and I got into an elevator, and in walks in Jamie Bell, and I'm just yeah, and I'm just like, it's weird because I always feel weird telling actors like about their early work that I'm a fan, because I feel like they might be like, well, have you seen anything else in the last 30 years, 20 years I've done? And he's great, obviously, he's a good, prolific career, but he was so good and I kind of just like, in the corner, like, you're Billy Elliot. He started laughing, and he's like, yeah. I was, that was
sounds like it went well.
It did, until he left the next floor, and just, I think he's very, very nice. He's very nice.
Awesome. That's really cool.
I got nervous.
Cool. All right. So I think that we are now ready to push it to do our official recording. So let's play that theme music and we will get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Young Screenwriters podcast. I'm Alexie, and I'm joined today by a producer from Kinolime, John Schramm, and a creative executive from Kinolime, Danny Murray. And we are going to be talking about everything related to getting your movie made, to writing like an amazing spec script that stands out from the rest, and looking at Billy Elliot as an example of a film that really, really does that super well, that ticks all the boxes. So I guess to kind of start, do you all want to introduce yourselves? How you got to Kinolime, kind of your background, what you look for in films? I guess we can start. Danny?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Danny. I basically graduated film school, was writing, moved to New York with the assumption that I would just like get a job at SNL or something because I knew nothing. That didn't work. But yeah, I eventually got like a writer's assistant job. That show was canceled. I got a good researcher job. That show was canceled. And then I had to get like a real job. And I was like, oh my God. Sorry, when I say real job, I mean, something that I didn't want. that was really informative for me. And I kept writing, I kept pushing for it. Then I got a producer's assistant job. That producer's assistant is affiliated with Kinolime, so I just ended up doing a lot of work around and with Kinolime, and eventually just with my previous room and development experience, just kept reading stuff until I got a bigger title, which was really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's super awesome. And what about you, John?
Well, my background is in screenwriting. I started out writing specs, and I was able to option my first screenplay, which gave me the courage to move from New York to LA. And when I got to LA, one of my first sort of big jobs that kind of propelled me a bit was I was hired by Oliver Stone to write for him and his production company. That's something he was going to direct, which then got me my first agent and first manager, and it trickled from there, from writing, open writing assignments, selling screenplays, ghost writing, kind of navigating through the Hollywood trenches of writing, and then got a bit frustrated with how feature film writers are treated in the business. And I had a good friend of mine who was coming off of a massively successful film. He was a producer from the Northeast, and he's kind of sat me down. He's like, if you want more control over your creative vision, he's like, I suggest you produce. You have that New York hustle. It's you're not playing by the LA rules in a way. So I decided to take a stab into producing. I launched my company at the height of COVID, and then finally this June I'm producing my first film that I started after I had that talk. It's an action thriller starring Michelle Yeoh, and I've partnered with some big heavy hitters who do all the John Wick films, the Rush Hour franchises. So it's kind of like my first big deal, and it's been an amazing process on the producing side. But in the meantime, I worked throughout France in their film market. I was able to learn the international and domestic ways of making movies and writing films. But then I got hooked up with Kinolime when I came back from living overseas. A mutual friend who produced a film with Kinolime initially brought me in, and my screenplay was submitted to them in their beta phase during the competition, which we're going to talk about, scored quite high, and then they brought me in to talk about their whole building of their company, and then it rolled into somehow I'm now quote unquote head of development and really helping the company in ways that I can guide, and whether it's the competition or producing on the side with them in our co-production arm. So it's been really, really exciting. I'm very excited to tell everyone about Kinolime and what we're doing.
That's awesome. And we are definitely going to get into that later. So if you all are aware, Kinolime is currently hosting a free script contest, and the winner will be produced. Their film will be produced with a budget of up to $15 million. So big deal. And we're definitely going to get into that down the road. And then I guess the first sort of craft question, or just, creative question, what kind of movies are you all drawn to, just like personally? Like what kind of stuff really sparks your interest?
It sounds so cliche, but something that, I mean, you don't want to say well written, but I feel like I want to see a writer take a swing. I want to see their soul bleed onto the page. I just love rawness, and it doesn't have to be rawness in a dramatic sense. It could be action raw or horror raw, but I guess because I've read thousands of screenplays, I do watch nothing but film, that my brain knows when it smells something or ticks the cliche box, and anything that's unique, when you zig instead of zagging, that really excites me personally when I'm reading something. So I love to see that rawness, that organicness of writing come out.
Absolutely. What about you, Danny?
I would say, well, my favorite type of filmmaking is like verite filmmaking, Sean Baker, French New Wave. I love that stuff more than anything. And I guess the way I feel like that kind of like computes over to when I'm analyzing screenplays is I love more than anything when I'm in a new world with characters I've never seen before, or cultures or people I've never seen before and I don't know anything about, and I instantly identify them with them in a way I hadn't really felt before. That's my favorite type of screenplay to read. Because yeah, it just I feel empathetic in a way that I don't really feel when I'm in a world I know.
That's awesome. For me, it's always like I tend to gravitate towards. One time Adam joked with me. He said, "Wow, you like a lot of white women in distress." It was
Oh.
like it was like Winter's Bone,
Yeah.
Juno,
Okay.
Short Term 12. Like I had this whole list, and I'm like, I'm so unique. And he's like, "Hey, did you know that this is the common
That's
thread?"
so funny. Yeah, I wonder
I'm like,
that would be a really cool like litmus test of like your favorite movies, and like I wonder if it's can psychoanalyze you based on the movies you love. That'd be fascinating to see.
Well, that was like I had this teacher when I was a freshman in college, and she said, and it was for this essay writing class that all of the students had to take. And it was like everybody had to write at least like 3 essays throughout the semester. And she said, by the end of the semester, I know who you are. Like I understand who you
Mhm.
are. And I was like, no, you don't. So I was like, okay, what do you know about me? And she's like, well, you write a lot about running away. And as someone who moved
Mm.
from Kentucky to New York, I was just like stabbed in the heart. I was like, oh
Bingo.
my God, I'm so transparent. Like,
Bingo.
I have been perceived and I don't know if I like it. Um, but yeah, so those are the kinds of things that you like, that you're drawn towards. And now I want to ask about when you're reading scripts, because you all read a ton of scripts.
Yeah.
What are some of the factors that you like, what are some of the things that you look for, especially when deciding if it's something that you want to take on or that you'd love to see made? What are some of the things that for you make you say like, yes, this one has to be made?
I just actually discussed this with John very recently because in terms of through a CE's perspective, especially like 99% of things that I read, I will discuss. We discuss everything we read, and that's it. Because if we're going to spend millions of dollars and put our reputations on the line and potentially, spend years of our lives
Mhm.
struggling to get something made and sold, I have to love it as much and care about it as much as that writer does from the first time I read it. Something John and I think John and I laugh about a lot is when I love something, I call him until he answers, and I'm jumping around, being like,
Oh, yeah.
"You need to
Oh,
read this now. This is the best thing ever. If we have to make this, and if it doesn't win Oscars, it's our fault because this is the best thing ever."
yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, that visceral feeling like has to kind of pour out of me. It doesn't have to, but it does. Like if I want to recommend us and tell everyone my opinion is we make this and we could probably it'll be a positive outcome for the studio. Every time that's happened, I either am laughing out loud for a lot of it, I'm crying, my jaws, I'm gasping in silence as I read. So I guess for me, there's the stuff about, yeah, well, for the budget we have, like, this is a lot of locations or something. But in general, I think it comes down to that. I need to love it as much as the writer.
And Danny and I work really well. And we also have another reader who's in Ireland who I've been working with for the last several years and kind of, I won't say training because he's a really talented writer himself, but kind of getting into the methodology of what we're looking for per se. But I want these guys, anyone reading for us, for me, whatever, to be I don't want you to think about budget and nothing. Like, does the story move you? Does it do something when you stop reading, you can't stop thinking about it? Like, I want to feel that passion. So I would prefer, like, even when I read, I don't read with any like governors on, right? Like, I'm the golf cart that's just going down the hill. Like, I don't care. I don't want to slow down. Like, I want to just go. And when I read, if it just wraps me in, if I'm not thinking about, oh man, I'm only 20 pages in and I got 110 left. It's the same thing when I watch a film. If I'm checking my watch, I'm checking my phone, I know I'm checked in. And that's a real good barometer for me to tell that there's something here. Obviously, if something catches me and I love it after, there's the producerial hat you have to put on, right? Can we do it for a budget? Where are we going to film this? How are we going to sell this film? I mean, there's the business side that you have to think about, but I'd like to say that myself and Kinolime, we're absolutely story first. I mean, we are a story-driven company. I'm a story-driven reader. I will get very angry over bad story or discussing structure because I'm so passionate. To me, when I got into the business, it was the common denominator. You can't make a great movie out of a bad screenplay. So I dedicated years of studying structure and this and that, watching videos. That's how I found you, Alexie. I was Googling and found a young screenwriter talk on Lady Bird. So I just get obsessive about story because it is the one, if you can master story, and I use math, it's very difficult to master anything, but learn story, it's going to help you in your film career just by having that base of knowledge. Because I will tell you, within the business, its story is not necessarily the top of everybody's checklist to be the first thing to be solid. They say it's a hard thing to do. It takes years of mastery to like learn story and how it operates. So
that's awesome.
Long-winded answer to your question, how I read a screenplay.
No, please, please. I want to hear all of it, and I'm sure everybody else does too. Something that I've heard a lot is like, people say, I wish I could remember which book I read it in, but I'm sure a lot of people say it, that concept is king. I'm curious what you all think about that. Like, do you think that that's true? Do you think maybe not?
It's tough because I think there's two schools of thought. Well, I'm sure there's more than two schools of thoughts, but you have the Aristotle side. He wrote Poetics, right? Is it Aristotle?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I get confused with my Greek philosophy.
No, you're all good.
Poetics, and he was about concept, right? It was your concept driven. Your character is a result of the concept, right, or the plot. Then you have the other side. You write inside out. You have your character first that drives the plot. I think they go hand in hand, and concept is king. I mean, there is an element to an amazing concept. I can understand why a John Wick sold, even going back 20 something years. Speed. I mean, that is the most epic concept, right? You can come up with for an action film because you see the movie right then and there. So I think there is something amazing about concept, but I wouldn't want anyone to deter writing about a coming of age story, set in a small town if it speaks to you. So, but there is something to be said about a really great concept that you can just see in the room or see in your head and how it operates. Because it does, our minds are so amazing at playing out the story, like just within a 30-second pitch. And it could sell your story. It could sell the concept through that. Danny?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always read and write almost strictly just thinking about characters and those characters in relation to the questions that interest me and made me want to write this thing. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm a bit conservative with this, but I always have felt that everything just runs through character and is a great, addition to it. I was talking to, I have a writing mentor. We were kind of talking about this the other day, and anytime I talk about a movie, and he's a very successful writer, and anytime I talk about a movie in relation to anything other than the story, he tells me to shut up and talk about the story if he hasn't seen it. He's like, I don't care about the cameras. I don't care about this. I don't care about setting. Just tell me why these people moved you. And that's all he cares about. And that's kind of my school of thought too.
Makes sense.
Alexie, what's your thought?
What's my thought? I mean, I think that, you know, I used to get really concerned about like high concept because people would say like, we want to write high concept, and kind of used the contrast to that as like, I was like, is there low concept? And the response I got back was kind of like, well, the opposite is sort of character driven, right? Rather than concept driven. And that's honestly why I love Billy Elliot so much, because something that I've kind of learned over time is that high concept, some people think it has to be like Michael Bay, like big action stuff. But really it's just like when the concept grips you, like when you can hear one line, you can hear the log line and you can imagine the entire movie. And Billy Elliot is like, you know, he's this boy from rural northern England, and his dad is a coal miner. His whole town is a coal miner. They're all on strike. He's supposed to be this tough guy, and he gets into ballet. And you know, it's you start being able to picture the kinds of problems that he's going to run into in that moment. And it's so and I would say that that story is really, really character driven. So I sort of push back now on the idea that high concept and character driven are separate things. And yeah.
They aren't. I mean, I think the best movies that stay with you, I mean, even, you know, think of Logan, right? I mean, it's a superhero movie, but it's character driven in that you're seeing, you know, Wolverine deal with an aging Professor X and his feelings towards this kid that he has to transport. It's not lacking in character, and it's something I struggled with when I kept, you know, evolving as a writer. Is I would think concept. I was always the concept king. Like it was that got me a lot of work early on, but I struggled with character. And then the last, you know, 5 or so years of my writing career, I really focused on character because I was lacking in my concepts. And I think you shouldn't limit yourself. I mean, write the best character and best concept you can. I think we have so many rules, and that's part of the reason why I left LA and moved back to New York was I didn't want to hear the marching orders from Hollywood of how to build a film out. And, you know, their one-liners of, oh, we're looking for this and we're looking for that, because then it messes you up. I found very much creatively. And you just have to like step away and just write what you love. Like it's so simple, but you have to write what you love. Like if you're passionate about a concept or a character or both, like just write it. You know, don't worry if it's not high concept enough, or, you know, I think you can never have too much character.
I think that to me led to writer's block for a while, was because I kept writing movies that were $500 million animations. And then I was told, like, why don't you write something like cheaper and smaller, and like all these, like, I kind of like a list of like things that I should go for. And it just kind of like stalled me out. Like it was a good notion, but it kind of stalled me out because I was thinking about it. I was coming at it really, really pragmatically and not creatively. And it was hard.
It's tough to turn off that, you know, demon on your shoulder of like, what's the market want? And, you know, follow these 10 tips of how to write a film. I mean, it's really difficult. I get it. But, you know, the best screenplays I've ever read was when they silenced that noise there, right? And just wrote something. And like Danny found an amazing screenplay out of South Africa. Someone submitted to us, and that's the one he called me 1,000 times in a row until I picked up. I had to read it that night. I had like a 7-week-old child, and I was like not sleeping, but I had to read it, and it was up to 1 a.m. And it was an amazing screenplay, and he was right for shouting that out. But it's low concept. I mean, it's just all about character, and it gripped me so much because I'm a high concept. Like I love great concepts. Like give me all the fun concepts out there. But this gripped me, and it was, you know, so. But it was so raw. So I think, we have to silence that voice of listening. So my writing mentor is a guy by the name of Fred LeBeau. He wrote the movie While You Were Sleeping, which is an all-time rom-com favorite for me. and he sold, you know, lots of screenplays in Hollywood and worked quite a bit. And he has this thing about following the herd. You know, can't follow the herd. I hear it in my head all the time when I'm writing, and it is that mentality of, you know, you got to write what's in here. You know, again, if you're passionate about John Wick and action, like it's gonna come out. You know, so but we have to silence that voice of, you know, market viability and, you know, 4-quadrant. If I hear 4-quadrant, I will bash my head against my desk. I can't hear it anymore. You know, I can't hear it.
So here's a question that we had come in, and maybe Danny, you could kind of give your thoughts, which is Tommy says, how do you write something you love and get it made, especially if it seems on the surface similar to recent stuff? So this was kind of tied to an earlier question about, you know, if you have a story and it's similar to something recent, is it good to pitch it to a producer? Like, how do you make it seem fresh? How do you make people still interested in it?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you are writing unique, thoughtful characters in a world that feels like it's from, you know, like in your case, one of, you know, arguably the most critically acclaimed show ever, that's not a bad thing. You know, if it's a fresh story and it's gripping, you know, if it's a great story, let's just say I read it and I thought it was amazing, I would go, oh my God, John, you have to read this. It's like Breaking Bad meets The Wire. It's the craziest thing ever. And then everyone wants to read that. That's not a bad thing at all. Yeah, just, you know, again, exactly what John said, just write what you love. And, you know, if you dig deep enough and torment everyone on that page enough, I'm certain that you'll have something that feels like it's yours.
And Tommy, I'll say this, Tommy M. I'll say that 1991, Point Break came out. Okay, 2000, Fast and the Furious. 9 years later, the same movie, except with, instead of surfing bank robbers, it was cars and, you know, stealing DVDs off the back of trucks on the highway. I mean, it is the same, structurally, it's the same film. It's the same movie. And, you know, you have how many movies are Fast and Furious now? So I think, but it had enough of a twist, enough, Danny used the word fresh, which you hear a lot. Is it fresh? Is it fresh? And what that means, at least what I feel, is it unique? Is it different? Does it have like your flavor in there, your ingredients? Because there's only so many plots, there's only so many things you can honestly come up with that are super, super unique. I think if you can take if you're inspired by Breaking Bad, there's something in there that's inspired you, but totally make it your own. I think it actually helps you when you're trying to sell it, because you can do the X meets Y, right? Breaking Bad meets Wire, or Breaking Bad meets, you know, Shogun, whatever. It's you want to use those comps because it will help the executives see what's in your head. And it's not bad to say, hey, you know, I'm inspired by arguably one of the greatest TV shows of all time, but I wouldn't get, you know, deterred by it being too similar. That's another thing that I find writers do get scared of. They're worried about being unique or having something so different. And again, if it's something that pops on the page that you took your inspiration from Breaking Bad and you made it your own, like that's going to be super helpful for you in getting this scene made and, you know, get some recognition for. So I would, again, watch Point Break and watch Fast and the Furious, the first one. It's the same film.
For sure. For sure. And I mean, there's a lot of films. I mean, there's a theory that like there's only so many stories that can really exist in this world anyway. So, you know, it's being inspired by the greats and that being obvious and then making it your own is never a bad thing. And I think that one of the things that can really help your story be distinct from something that you're inspired by is, even if the situation is similar, even if there's like a similar world or whatever it is, your characters are writing your characters in a way that only you could, which ties into this question from D'Angeline Lawrence, which is, what makes a character compelling and someone that the audience wants to care about?
I mean, ugh, it's weird. I don't think I can quantify that in an answer because that's like the magic sauce right there. If I knew that, I could plug it in. But um, I would say more than sympathy, creating empathy. So I think
Mm.
you want to see a flaw in a character that they don't see themselves. I think you want them to have a goal, a want, that is not tied to even their answer to their flaw, but almost something. Well, I shouldn't even say that. You want to see them have a want, and you want to have obstacle. I mean, Sorkin talks about obstacle and intention. That's his whole way of building out story. But the compelling part, yeah, that's tough. I think, yeah, like giving them a secret, a desire, a want. It's that's a tough one. But I think having a want and then a barrier to that at least makes me, and an empathetic nature to them makes me care for them. Like you care for Billy Elliot, which I don't know if we should talk about that now, but he has a goal of what he wants, and there's barriers in that way, and you feel for him because of his empathy towards his backstory with his mother and his family life. So I think those are like the secret ingredients. I don't know. D. Murray, what do you think?
Man, I think, oh God, because you're right. It is like, especially the way that I feel like I view this stuff. It really is the sauce, like you said.
So I'm curious. Can I ask you kind of like a question related to this? So John said that you read this amazing script from South Africa that was extremely character driven, and it just got you so excited and wanting to share it with people. What do you think it was about the characters in that made it work?
Yeah. So one, I think, kind of like Billy Elliot, it is a very young boy trying to figure himself out, but who is swallowed by the guilt and the shame and the restrictions that his family have to put upon him because it's all they know. Uh, so yeah, I think that a really good way when you're thinking about how to make these characters pop and how to make people that are compelling, what John said, like know what your character wants, know what he needs. There's an amazing script notes episode where Craig Mazin, it's like pretty much a staple of I feel like most people that would be on something like this, but he just talks about how can I torment my characters and how can I just think that, how can I get to a point as a writer where I think I have just ripped them to shreds and demoralized them as much as I can, and then I dig deeper and I find out more about them and more about why the people around them need them and maybe why they don't like that, or what they need outside of that protagonist and maybe how they're stopping that. And then you just have this big web of complexity, and I think that's probably what makes us interested and makes the best characters feel really unique, and why we love them and we think about them is because we just build like this really complex web of human experience that we all feel, and you could just kind of dig as much as you want. I don't know that I guess that's my thought. I don't know.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'd love to kind of turn to Billy Elliot as an example because, when we were going to do this episode and I was talking with John, I was like, well, let's do a movie that you wish you made. Like, what's a movie that you really wish that you made? And you said Billy Elliot. And I'm going to share a little breakdown just kind of like for people to browse it. We're probably not going to go through it beat by beat, but yeah, I'm curious, what about it was the reason that it was like your answer when I was like, what do you wish you made?
Well, I think that Billy Elliot is the type of film that I don't feel like it's made anymore. Sad to say, it's that sort of sweet spot between like studio slash drama, heartfelt, upbeat movie that's about a time and set where you leave the theater filled with joy, filled with that cinematic experience. You know, it's like the feels. Like, thank you for the feels. There's this great YouTube essay on thank you for the feels about certain movies in cinema, like Dead Poet Society. You know, Billy Elliot, I think in today's dollars would be made for like $9-10 million, right? So it's in a sweet spot. You know, if you're talking budgetary for budgetary reasons, but it's just so full of life. There's like very little fat in that movie, and you know the dance sequences and just you feel for this character. I love movies that make me feel. You know, I'm less about spectacle than I am about the feels. I want to feel something, and Billy Elliot is one of those movies that just really makes me feel on so many levels. So it's like, yeah, it's like that's the type of movie that I would love and wish I could make. Those types, because I think they linger through the decades. It's one of those things that people discover and like, oh, that's such a great film, because it hits that, like there's a universal chord in all of us that it plucks the string, you know, and it's the reason why it was like a huge hit back then, and there's a Broadway play, and we're talking about it 20 something years later. So that was for me the reason why I would love to make, you know, Billy Elliot type of movies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And something that stood out to me, I mean, I'm curious if you all agree, not to get too heavy into structure, but when I was trying to map out the structure, you know,
That's
like
a
I was
tough
trying
one.
to
I'm with you. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so in my mind, I will say that I was kind of going through like what was the inciting incident exactly, because it was difficult because there's so many moments in the story where there's a turn that propels the character forward. And there was so many of those propelling turns that it's like, okay, well, what is actually the moment where Billy is now locked into this journey and can't go back, that he is going full steam ahead and he's on that track. And the conclusion I kind of came to was that it's actually pretty late into the film in my mind. It's about 30 minutes in. It seems like a long first act, but with turns all through it. When Miss Wilkinson is talking to him in the car after she drops him off and is like, "You blew it." And he's like, "What did I blow?" And she said, "You know, you could get into the Royal Ballet School." And he gets back in the car and they have a conversation and he agrees to the private lessons. And that's really the moment when he's down to go, he's willing to go against what he knows his dad wants. His dad at this point has
that's
been
your break into two.
That's what I think. I
agree with you. I do agree with you.
Okay, cool.
It was a tough one because it's like minute 34. I mean, on my thing, and maybe the minute in the intros I could have cut out, but it's definitely around the 30 to 34 minute mark. A lot has happened up until then. But I definitely think that is your end of act one, break into two moment, because it is giving him a goal that we ask. I think of it this way. Think of it when you're watching a play, like when the curtain drops, right? That's your end of act one. There's a question that's posed, right? What is the question that we want to wait till the end of the play or the movie to see is, will he get into the ballet school? So that dramatic question or plot question is, boom, plucked right there. But it's against our instincts because we want it to be around the 20-25 mark, which you always hear in Hollywood, right? But again, it went against convention. It really, and you can't remove a scene up until there. Like, I have every scene written down in front of me. You can't. The Jenga will fall if you remove a scene. So it just goes to show you that, you know, build towards you the way you want. But I agree with you. The break into two is that exact moment, because it gives him a goal, a driving force, and us as an audience a question that we want. We will wait to the end to answer is, will he get into the ballet school? That is the engine right there.
Absolutely.
Dan, you have any? Do you agree? Disagree?
I agree fully. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but I think that, like, you know, when I had my document open beside me while I was watching it and I was kind of going through, I initially typed into the inciting incident, oh, it's him seeing the ballet class and going over there from boxing. But then you realize that there's so many, like I mentioned, of those turns that keep us hooked. And I think that, and like you said, none of the scenes can be pulled out. And in my mind, I think that's why this later inciting incident works, is because we've done what you said, John, about empathy. All those twists and turns have built empathy for this character. We see his flaw, we see that the world's kind of against him, and so we're along for the ride, even though he hasn't had that strong objective given to him yet. Yeah, and then, I think that strong midpoints are always one of the things that really hooks me into a film, and it's always, in my mind, strongest when the midpoint almost seems like it could have been the original break into Act 3. Like, you're pushing your character to a really far point, and then then you're kind of like, where could they go from here? And when you move it to the midpoint and you push them to what you think is the end, with like Tony getting arrested, he has to miss the audition, the dad is like, absolutely not, you're done, all these terrible things, you have to wonder at that point, what could Billy possibly do? It feels like you should be near the end. And the writer makes the characters dig deep and keep going.
So what do you think the midpoint, what's your opinion of the midpoint?
I think the midpoint was the sequence where Tony gets arrested, Billy has to miss the audition to go to court with his brother, Miss Wilkinson shows up and argues with Billy's dad, and he like has his dance through the neighborhood where everyone sees him. It's sort of like it's a big sequence, but I think all of it is sort of back-to-back beats that I would say make up the midpoint. I'm curious what you all think.
Danny, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree. I'm thinking back on that because I read an early draft. It's like I was trying to find the latest draft I could find, but it seemed to be kind of an early draft right after I watched the film, and it's a lot different. But yeah, I think in terms of Billy's character arc, yeah, I would agree. I don't think it really is all that. I think it is when he can't go to the audition. To me, that's pretty much the midpoint.
There's like a sequel. Yeah, it's tough because you don't want to get hung up. There are some films that have a midpoint scene, like just one scene that is your midpoint. And there are films and story structures where it's a swath of films that make up a midpoint. So I wouldn't get hung up on, to your audience, like on what is a midpoint, like exactly, because I think I obsessed over that as well. But it's really that, for me, that moment in the house when he's told to dance on the table and they're fighting, because that is really the lowest point, right? At that moment, he missed the audition, but he could maybe go again. But that's the moment that if he didn't change and start being more proactive, like because he dances the way through the street and kind of saying to his brother, I can dance. Like that's the moment the movie shifts, because he kind of went from, I won't call him passive, but he wasn't as proactive. And that's the moment for me that the movie switched into like another part of the film. So you're right. In my opinion, I think you're right that section of scenes is the midpoint, because it all felt like the movie could go another way if he didn't decide to do that. But and so be it. Minute 58, smack in the middle, is when the fight scene in the family's house and he dances in the street is around. So I think that's a really strong midpoint, and films fail, stories fail if your midpoint is not that strong. I know we think of inciting incidents and Act 1 breaks and Act 3 climaxes and Act 2 climaxes, but the midpoint is in my opinion, the most overlooked thing when I'm reading a screenplay. I see screenwriters aren't putting enough attention to is building to that midpoint, and this does it flawlessly.
I'm curious if that's so. When you're both reading scripts, is that something that, whether consciously or subconsciously, that you think that you look for? Is about halfway through some sort of twist that catches you by surprise, or like where the characters are pushed to a low? Like, is that something that you look for?
I don't think you necessarily have to be proactively thinking about that. I almost just feel like, you know, if that doesn't happen, you will become disengaged.
Yeah.
When I read or even write, like, I honestly am not really thinking about structure until I'm like getting really nitpicky. I'm just thinking about, you know, like feel and pacing and characters. Um, so yeah, I feel like when it comes to the midpoint, that's just something naturally. If there isn't that, you know, that build up and then just your character fully kind of changing in some way there, then you're not going to be engaged in the same way.
Yeah, I would say it's not something I consciously look for in a first read. Because if I'm up to the middle of the screenplay and I'm engaged, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just going with the flow. It's when if someone asks me to read a screenplay and analyze it, and I don't love it, I'll always hone in like you probably have a weak midpoint, I would say, or you didn't build to that. I think a lot of writers it's easy to write a first act, or easier, I would say, because it's all set up and you got characters in motion and they have a cool question, the journey you send them on, but then it's like that gap of act two, right? We think of, oh my God, how are we going to get through act two? But you have this really awesome beacon right in the middle to build towards, and it does the great screenplays. It's just most of them, I would say, probably have amazing midpoints. They call it potentially a mirror moment when your protagonist is in the mirror, like talking to themselves about change and I need to change myself or I'm going to be different. Or it's a moment that they become more proactive, reactive to proactive. But there's a gear shift that happens at the midpoint. You can't explain it, but it does shift the film or the story into like a different gear. And that's what propels you to that act two climax to get you going. So it's definitely like, think of like Mario Kart when you hit that little thing to make you go boost. That's like the midpoint's that boost that just sends you to the end of act two.
It reminds me of something that John Warren would say, is like he would always have people coming up to him, like he's at the dentist and the dentist is like working in his mouth and they're like, I have a screenplay. And, and then they're like, I started writing it, but I got stuck. And John would say, on page 60.
Yep.
And they were like, how did you know? And he said every single time that's what happens is people get to page 60 and they get stuck because it's tough. And
I obsess about the midpoint. I love writing a midpoint because that's when you can shift and throw the film different. I mean, that is just, I love the midpoint, So I think, and that's what it is. I used to get stuck and now you have to just embrace the pain of the midpoint,
Yeah. When I like just started writing, if I got stuck, I would usually just turn whatever world I was in into some like magical surreal, like I would just completely destroy everything I was building towards and just change the story because I didn't know what I was doing.
As we do. This kind of ties into a question that we had from Caleb, which is what practices, resources, whatever would you recommend to get the story down well? Because we've been kind of talking about, writing to a midpoint as something that can help. But overall, what advice do you have there?
Practices. So something that I like to do if I'm trying to get a story out is I don't write, actually. I take a week or 2 or 3 and I just think about it. I pace around my neighborhood. I bring a recorder with me and I just talk into it freely. Like I don't want to have to think of act breaks and anything. And I just ramble. I ramble. Like, okay, we're going to go here. Because I found for myself, I thought too much about the rules. I thought too much about, on page 25, I got to be here. And, I got to end it here. So when I broke away from that and I smashed that barrier, that's when my best writing would come out because it would lead me to different directions and just talk to yourself. I mean, that's to me, getting it out loud with a recorder and just hours of rambling, hours. But eventually you'll find the nuggets in there. I think Greta Gerwig, she figures out her story by writing 400-page drafts. She does it through typing. I'm way too lazy for that, so I just pace and I talk into a recorder. I would say that to me is how I get my story out in a form that I can start moving around, the pieces. I lay it out in that way. Or if you want, do a vomit draft. I think that's a great practice to get it out of you. Just don't think about structure, don't think about character, just 10 days straight, get 10 pages a day, and you got a first draft or so, and just vomit it out.
I am curious. Do you listen back to your recordings, or is it mostly just that like it gets you talking and thinking?
So if there's a session that I found that there was some really good stuff in there, I'll listen to it back. But I do remember the cool nuggets. It could be an hour walk. I maybe get 2-3 really good ideas. I'll remember that. Like it'll stick to me. But I will, like, especially now with certain programs, you can plug in your recorder and it transcribes it for you, so you can go through like the 100 pages of ramble to go find out the nuggets. But no, it's more just to get it out so then I can remember the 2 or 3 kind of gems in there.
I was gonna say, I feel like I would just do it just to be able to talk to myself without getting stares, because you just kind of talk into your recorder, you feel better about it. But really, it's just the process of talking about it out loud.
Exactly. I think just talking out loud, I'm very blessed to have a lot of really fun, smart friends that are in the business, with Danny being one of them now. And I'll call him up, and Lexie, I bugged you about a story. So it's like it's just the process of talking it out, I think, is important. So a recorder is a really cheap way, because if I had to buy my friends dinner or lunch every time I talked about, I would be broke. Because I would totally, all day I'd be talking to them. So I would say talk it out.
Absolutely.
I must say, I think it's extremely impressive that you could listen to your own voice. That's John. I can't tell if that's like an achievement or just sociopathic, but it's impressive nonetheless. I think something that I guess when I'm trying to get my story down, at least for me, because most of the time when I'm writing, I have a specific place or people in mind. So this probably isn't too helpful, but I think it is. What I like doing is the type of people I want to write characters about or based off of. I just ask them any question I could think of that could possibly relate to my story. And I've done this on the train. John and I love taking the train. I really love doing it with strangers. And I learn what about these people motivates them, who they are. And then, I'll have like a loose story idea in mind, but I like building it off of, these funky people and what they tell me. I think a couple other things in terms of once the writing actually commences. I used to struggle with trying to find every resource I could, where I had like a mountain of screenwriting books and podcasts and YouTube and people. And I think structure and tips are great to an extent. I think what you really need is, people that you trust to hear your story, and you need a couple of really critical, whether that's books or a podcast or some sort of seminar, you have a couple of those that you use as a beacon. Anything more than that usually scrambles my brain. So I guess that's probably like my 2 tips. Talk to real people, ask them questions, and have a couple little beacons, whether that's people or books that drive you there.
That's something that I always try to encourage people to do, is sometimes you get stuck in this mode where people are just reading so many screenwriting books and not writing. So my advice is always, once you finish a screenwriting book, write a screenplay before you read anything else. Like, write a screenplay, try what they said, see what works for you and ditch what doesn't work for you, but just making sure that you don't get stuck in this constant loop where people are scared to actually just jump in because they don't think they have enough knowledge yet. You probably know more than you think you do. We're in a very story saturated world.
You do, and I think you grow through every draft. So it's by sweating and bleeding at the keyboard will you get it's the only way to be a better writer. I mean, you can read, I've read so many books and it paralyzed me from writing at a certain phase, and you have to just bleed on the key. You just got to sit down. I would say turn the water on, and eventually it'll start flowing. It may take 5 minutes, an hour, but eventually the water's going to flow, and you just got to do it every day, and you just got to do it. And then if you go back on your work, analyze it, then read a screenwriting book to analyze your work, that's fine, but you just got to write.
Yeah, there's no substitute for just doing the thing.
Yep.
I did want to talk about one more thing about Billy Elliot because I really loved it.
Jeez.
And it was just, for me, why I think it was elevated from just like a good film to like a great one. In my mind, I was watching this and I was just so pissed at the dad. I was so pissed at the brother. Like, I was like, how, like, you suck so much.
Yep.
Just let this kid live. And what was amazing is that it wasn't just about Billy's transformation. He changed, and he changed the world with him. And it was this really, I think that for me gave me that cathartic moment that you were talking about, John, like where you leave and it feels like, okay, that's like cinematic.
Yep.
That's like what I want to see, is you feel uplifted because the other people got to change too.
That's a great point. And it is, I think, stories that like that are dramatic. Now, again, it just usually is the one character that changes, and they don't, because of we're worried about time, page count, etc. So they don't get the time to explore the ancillary characters, and you are as engrossed in the riot, strike, subplot, and the brother's issues and the father's. I mean, you're not, maybe not as much as Billy, but it's really strong. I mean, you're really engaged in those subplots. So the writer gave them each a moment when the dad sat on the bedside and told Billy he's going to do it, and then the brother's like, you're right, mom would let you do it. Like, and then immediately, kind of all sins are forgiven. Like they were assholes. Or I'm not curse, but sorry, they were not nice people. They were not nice people, for most of the movie, but it just gives them that redemptive moment where they change, and all sins are forgiven, and then you like them and you care, for how they're going to move forward from there on out. So it's just so well crafted. It's like such an amazing. Looking at each scene now, it's just such an amazing screenplay.
Yeah, and it also, what you're saying about the supporting characters. Again, it's this beautiful thing. If you write great supporting characters and that have like very specific, strong ties to the main characters, your protagonist, every character in the film that isn't Billy is drowning in shame and guilt. And he is every single character's vessel to have something to look forward to. He is the only win the entire town and anyone in his family can have. And you really don't realize that until, pretty much the third act. And it's beautiful.
My only critique is that I was really, really wanting to watch that whole final dance. And I understand why they couldn't just put the whole dance in there. But I was like, I want to see Billy go. Like, I want to see him do it.
Agreed. They should I wish they would have filmed that and had like a DVD extra when it came out of the actual performance. But I think they did end it at the perfect spot.
Yeah, they did.
That moment, him in the air, stopping. And yeah,
definitely.
So great. So great.
It was so good. It was so good. Well, I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the contest that you all are doing through Kinolime. I gave a little bit of a snippet before, but why don't you all tell us about it yourselves?
Take the wheel, John.
Okay. Well, Kinolime. So we've put together a competition that is free to screenwriters. It could be anywhere in the world. Has to be in English. But we essentially have built a company that we believe in two things: the story. So we want to give screenwriters a shot that maybe don't have their way into quote unquote Hollywood or getting their movies made. And we also want to include the audience in that factor. So we've created, I mean, if you want to compare it, kind of like American Idol-esque, where it's not fully democratic, where the audience has 100% say, because we have a say in the voting process as well. But the audience has the majority of the say in what gets picked. We incentivize the audience to read screenplays, to rate them on our website. It's a massive competition. We have so many submissions so far. We're about to start our voting phase next month. And we just really, our goal is to like break that next new writer. Like we want to discover the hidden gem that Hollywood didn't want to look at, or they couldn't even get it out there into the hands of the people who can make a decision. We want to be the company that makes that movies, and we're willing to bet on the audience's passion, that we're going to finance and produce the winning screenplay. So the audience is going to vote their favorites, and the winner, Kinolime, we're going to finance the movie and we're going to produce the movie. So we just feel that Hollywood's in this big stalemate right now with original content. It's really difficult to get original stuff made. And those are the best movies in my opinion. Not discounting, IP driven stuff. There's of course books that are phenomenal. I don't know. I think Billy Elliot was a book. So, but it's just, we're so excited to get this thing going, and we feel that people can now have a say in what movies get made, like actually have a say.
That's awesome.
And on the screenwriter side of it as well, something to factor in is John and I read every single submission we receive. Yeah. Now, we can't always guarantee we're going to read the entire thing through. Like, if we just don't like something, we may not read all the way through, but we will at least read your first act.
And we don't have to read it, so that we don't have a say in the vote. We're not rating it like the blacklist, right? So I just want to make sure people understand that it's submitted. The audience is going to read and rate it, but we want to read it ourselves. We just are curious, like what's out there, and we read everything that comes in. So it's been such a real pleasure. Sorry, Dan, I just want to clarify that.
No, yeah, but you're not sending it into a void. And when we love something, we jump up and down and keep an eye on things, So, yeah, our entire idea is. It was interesting because I was at South by Southwest last year talking about Kinolime in the very, very early stages, and I was just hearing about people that have no access to ever get a serious lit agent or go to Hollywood. There was a West Virginia writers group that was interested in us. There was like an incarcerated writers group, and not discounting anyone else who just can't break in, but there are a lot of unbelievable voices that just can't really navigate, the 100-year structure of how this thing works with the studios. So again, like someone in my perspective as well, like if you are writing, you have stuff, and you're querying 1,000 lit agents and producers, that is a very, very hard thing to do if you don't have the connections to push you there. It's virtually impossible. So, it is it's a decent chance just to, at the very least, have a chance to get your movie made, and a guarantee that a CE and a producer are going to read and talk about your script at the very least.
That's awesome. And so for this contest, you're accepting features. So anything between, I think you said 75 pages and 150.
Yep.
That is brave. 150.
Oh, I know. But again, we just want to make sure that brilliant screenplay that we're not discounting that. We're hoping that someone wrote a 150-page screenplay that we could shoot for 90 pages. But we want to read everything. Is essentially.
Absolutely. And then Tommy asked, will this be a one-time contest, or will this be open again in the future?
Oh no, we're going to be doing multiple a year. So we're doing our first one. We're right in the middle of it now, and then we're going to do another one towards the end of this year, and then we have plans to do 3 next year. And then eventually we'll open it up to a TV pilot competition. We're looking into like mini competitions of short films that will give, grants or monies to go film something fun for the winner of that. But no, we're going to be doing at least the very least 2 this year.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
I guess so I know that, the pitch is like make your movie up to 15 million. Do you have any quick tips for people to see who maybe don't have an understanding of budget when they're writing? Like maybe they haven't looked into it from the production side. What are some quick tips that can help you figure out if your budget is close to that range or cut down on it, or would you not worry about it? What do you all think?
Danny, you go
I feel
first.
like, yeah, I mean, there's like simple things you can do, which is like, one, the less pages, the less money it costs. Um, this is like not even, I guess, in reference to our competition, but in general, you could just look up what the major streamers and studios are purchasing films, like what that looks like. And basically, every film that's being purchased right now, unless it's from a premiere or legacy director, right around hour 25 minutes, hour 45 minutes. Just in general, if you're looking to get something that you could seriously market, that's probably going to be a good start. Another good start is just like less locations, less money, less characters, less money. If you're a first time writer, also, that's, it's a lot easier to write 2 or 3 amazingly compelling characters that you could see, maybe a big premiere actor want to do it, like the right guy gives it to him, compared to like a sprawling epic for your first, your first feature that gets produced. Minor things like if you don't need to have your exterior nighttime shot, put it inside. That will save you a lot of money. Yeah, but in general, write how you want to write,
Yeah.
and if you want to keep the market in mind, do so. But write whatever you think is the most compelling.
I'm from the camp of just write your best story and let us figure that out, right? If it's a space opera, and it's really amazing, we'll try and get it done, or maybe we can shift the locations to something less. I mean, we would love to, siphon out the story, see what drew us to that space opera. Maybe it's something that can be shot like in a Western style, or something that may be less expensive. But I would say, for writers in general, you want to capture people's attention with your voice and your skills. So write the best thing you can and let the producers figure that out. But when you get a couple under your belt, then start thinking about, okay, like it's tough because I really want to like fight the man, so to speak, and not conform to the rules. But there are rules, and it's just an unfortunate part of the business that you have to play some of the games. So, then maybe start writing something that is a little more budget friendly, a little bit something of what gives you a better chance for getting that movie made. But I say just write what you love, because that will rise to the top. That will get a producer, director, financier's attention if it's really, really good. And if it's you're holding back because you're trying to do the less to get your budget down, it might feel inauthentic and forced, and that's going to turn people off. So just write the best story you can, and let us figure out how to shoot that.
One last thought on this. It's kind of different, but just in terms of thinking about your script, in terms of the people that may option or produce it, Billy Elliot is a masterful example of how you can write for, to submit and to shop to studios. In the first 2 pages, especially if you actually read the script, I want to pull it up. There's a line he says on page 1. It's just the song playing. I didn't catch it when I first watched the film. The line, like the first thing you hear is "danced myself into the tomb, Is it wrong to understand what dwells inside a man, what it's like to be alone? And then on the next page, we find out he's poor. We find out his family's fractured. And we find out that his neighborhood is in complete turmoil. A couple pages after that, we fully know all of the rest of our characters, what their relationship is to Billy, and why that's important. And all of that happens basically in 2 pages. So if, I'm like going through a pile of scripts and the entire story is laid out 2 pages in, it's a lot easier to start looking into your theme, the questions you're asking. It's a more compelling read. The faster you could get that stuff out is also helpful in terms of marketing your script.
That totally makes sense. And then I just wanted to go over sort of like the practical, like just the logistics of this contest. Looks like there's about 19 days left to submit. The deadline is April 4th.
I think it's 4th. Yep.
4th. Yep. And the first step is you can submit your script totally for free.
Yep.
And then you are going to move to a vote for the top 30, right?
Yep. So we take how many scripts we have, which are a lot, and the audience goes in, reads and votes their favorite, and then the top 30 of that move on to the next round.
So for those, we talked about this a little bit before, but the way that that's going to work is you're going to take the title page off, right?
Correct. Yep.
So they're anonymous, and you're going to put them in front of readers. And so who are your readers? Who's the audience in this?
You, me, Dan. No, I mean anybody. That's the beauty. Anybody can read and rate and vote. We really want the cinema lovers, people who want to have a say in what we will make, to come on and read, scour through the catalog. We offer some really amazing incentives, like equity in the film, like you can own a piece of the movie. For screenwriters, we have a great coverage program that we give. Well, if you read X amount, you'll get a bunch of notes. We'll read your screenplays. We'll do a Zoom. We have screenwriter merch with courses and books, and then for film lovers, we're doing movie tickets and all these things. So we're really we want people to. We understand the time that it takes to read a screenplay for sure, but you're going to be a part of history. You're going to literally break someone's career. It's like finding Tarantino and being like, I voted on Tarantino's screenplay and I got him his first job and first movie made. Like I think that's so cool. So it's everyone that can vote. Anyone that wants to, create a Kinolime account and just start reading. And we also have an audible version of every screenplay, so you can listen. If you don't want to read, you want to go to, you're driving to work, going on a jog, you could do a sort of an audible-esque version that we've created, we built in-house to listen to your screenplays.
Oh, that's cool. So everyone's screenplay gets kind of converted into an audible format.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And you can assign different voices to different characters, so it's kind of a cool experience.
That's awesome. That's really cool. It's so valuable to hear that out loud, to hear your story.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And then I guess, what do you think are just from like the benefits of reading scripts too? Like, that's really valuable to writers, even outside of all the other stuff, right?
100%. Yes. Well, you'll start to see, this is actually a tip Oliver gave me. He said, read and watch bad movies, because you're going to start to see what makes them bad and like why is it that are not great. And I think if you start reading screenplays, you're going to start to you'll get a sixth sense of what's good, what's not good, and why it's not good, why it works, why it doesn't work. But that's just repetition. That's just reading and reading and reading and reading, because there is something innate in a great story that that's why everyone has a different view on how to write a screenplay, how to make a great screenplay. That's why there's 1,000 books on the subject, but no one really has the perfect exact answers, because it is innate. It's something that you can't really quantify. And by reading and reading and reading, you're training your muscle, your story muscle, and how to get stronger. And eventually it's going to lay in your subconscious. And when you write, you're going to like not do the things that didn't work in the other screenplays, and, write better yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So you submit by April 4th.
Then
submit it. And then
Yeah.
it'll move to a vote where you can either listen to a bunch of scripts, you can read a
Correct.
bunch of scripts, vote for your favorites, win a ton of awesome stuff like equity in the film, potentially
Sure.
coverage, movie tickets, all of that. So that's for the
Set
top
visits,
30.
yeah, all of it. It's all there.
And then that's the top 30, and then it gets narrowed to 10, right? From there.
No, from when you get that out of that 30, we
Mhm.
do a podcast phase where we take the top 30 screenplays, and we have an in-house studio in Brooklyn at one of our offices, and we get 2 amazing New York actors. We have a host, and we do like a 15-minute podcast where we read a scene, we talk about the story. Think of it as like a pitch deck or a pitch book for your movie. And it's another way to engage the audience to want to read your thing, your story. They analyze the scene, they talk about what's great, what's not. So it's a really cool interactive way to hear the story kind of come to life in some way and discussing it. So out of that, so that's at the podcast phase, which is 30. Then people vote again. So then you whittle that 30 to the 10. And that's when what we have called the judges table. Now that's when the vote comes to Kinolime. So we have our in-house judges. We can't reveal the names yet, but we have some, big producers, industry titans, also within our company that are voting. And we discuss the 10, and we see, okay, out of the 10 screenplays that are here, what do we love? What are the movies we want to tell? And then we chop that list down to 3, and then we give it back to the audience for the final vote. And then, our mindset would be like, we would want to make all 3 of these movies at the end, and we leave it to the audience, and then they can pick which movie they want us to finance and produce.
That's super awesome. So yeah, I would recommend. I mean, it's free, so why not give it a
Got nothing to
shot?
lose.
Yeah.
Got nothing to lose, and a movie to gain.
And a movie to gain, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. Our CEO came with an amazing idea, and he's the best, and we just love that we're taking swings. We're taking swings, and the first movie is gonna be so great. I can't wait. I can't wait for the audience to pick their favorite, and like we go into production and we just make this thing happen. It's gonna be like a collective, building of a great movie.
And I also think it's so nice to have a contest where that the people running it are so passionate about story and about writers and about, elevating the content that people want to see. Because that's definitely something that like I've been concerned about when applying to contests in the past. It's kind of like, well, do they actually care about my submission, or are they collecting a fee, right? Like, do they actually want the goods? Like, how much should they personally care?
Yeah, I would Danny and I fight over story. Like we'll debate structure and theory, like in good friendship, but like we get passionate about it. I mean, there are some. I mean, Danny, how many hectic fights we've had internally with the company over things because we're that passionate about story, like beyond maybe to an unhealthy degree, but. Again, to me, it's the only common denominator to a great film. So why wouldn't you become obsessed with story? I don't know. Danny?
Yeah, and the other thing to factor in as well is we're not just a contest. Again, the beautiful thing about, I guess, one submitting, but in general that I love about Kinolime is that the contest is an arm of Kinolime, and then we also co-produce projects that need, funds to finish. And let's just say like something we love is in the competition and it doesn't win. It's not like we just we don't reserve the right to option or potentially make it. Like if we love something, like I said earlier, like we'll jump up and down and clamor to the powers that be that these things should be financed. So yeah, that's
like there's 2 screenplays I've already identified that if it doesn't win, I'm like immediately contacting the writer, for us, like immediately, and just also we're producing a movie in Canada with Neve Feichman, who did this year's Blackberry. He did Enemy with Denis Villeneuve and The Red Violin and Possessor. So we found, that's our other arm of Kinolime, the co-production arm. So outside of the competition, we do produce and develop movies on the side as well. So it's, again, if we see something we like in the competition, we can contact the writer and say, after that, hey, we would like to, talk about maybe developing this out or making a movie.
That's awesome. And then just to address something that I heard a lot, what do you all so are people allowed to, first off, like, do they have to not submit their scripts to anywhere else? Can they submit here and keep kind of pushing? Yeah.
No, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you're not restricted. Like, your script is yours. There is a certain period, John probably knows a bit more, like he could say this more eloquently, where when we get very deep into the competition, we need to run a short option so that you can't, we can't be down like in marketing this thing and
so
you're like, ooh, top 3, whoops, sorry, actually I'm leaving.
So once you get to the top 30, so you're fine until the top 30, and then if you make it to the podcast phase, which you're one of 30, we do have to retain some rights to the screenplay, only because we're going to be investing dollars and monies into producing the podcast. And if you decide to dip halfway through production, it messes us up. So, and then once you get to obviously the 10 and the 3, we have to have the rights as a company to go to the vote. So if and when you win, you can't dip on us after you won and say, actually, I'm going to go. I don't know why you would, but let's say you just didn't want to do it. It would destroy the whole competition. So we do have an option that only runs as long as you're in the competition. Now you could exit the competition if you want, it's your choice, but you can't, no one else could, let's say, buy it from you in the middle of the competition if you're, under an option with us, unless you want to bounce
top 30. So if you submit now, it's not like
if you submit now, it's totally
rights. There's no option.
It's like submitting on the screenplay. Yep.
So it's just like, as you get further, all of these things will be discussed with you before
Correct.
It's like you're locked in or anything.
Exactly. Yeah, we're writers first, so we very much care about your concerns and the rights to your screenplay. We want to talk it through, and that's why we're very transparent. We're very open. Ask us any questions. We'll Zoom with you. We'll talk to you. If you're in New York, we'll meet in person and we'll talk about it. But it is a concern that I think some writers have, but I say the risk to me outweighs the reward. Unless you want to submit it somewhere else, then you can remove it from the competition at any time. And if you don't move on to the next phase, the option automatically expires and the rights revert back to you immediately.
That's awesome. So I guess as like my last question to you all, what would you say to somebody who is nervous, maybe has never entered a screenplay competition before, or is kind of new to this, or never been to New York or LA? What would you say to the person who's not sure about submitting or has some nerves about it?
Yeah, Danny, you go first.
Well, one thing is that your name your name is not going to be attached. It's just there's no cover page. It'll say the title of your script, logline,
and your username. So you make up a username,
and which can be your name, whatever. But I guess you can make an anonymous thing.
Well, it can't be your name. We'll find out. But yeah, so basically, there's no way no one will know it's you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, it's just your story, and unfortunately, if if you're writing and you care about your story and you do dream of getting it made, at some point you are going to have general meetings. You're going to need to pitch. You're going to have to schmooze with guys in Vineyard Vine shirts in West Hollywood, and it's going to suck. Yeah. It's just part of it. This is a lot less demanding than that. So, I hope that lends you some solace.
And I would say that something I struggled with early on, I found out that it wasn't a fear of failure. It was actually a fear of success that stifled me. I think it's something comfortable to sit in the I'm just writing and one day. But it's not about failing for me. It was always about almost fear of success. And I would say this is your chance to dip your toe in. There is no shaming if the screenplay is not great. There is no forums that people are like, oh, John Schramm's screenplay was terrible. You're not gonna get it from any angles, any sort of negative feedback. But I would say, oh God, I can't believe I'm gonna say this. It's like my Little League coach just came to my head. He's like, you can't steal second unless you take your foot off first. So you gotta, if you want to steal a base, like you gotta try. So, definitely submit it and see what happens. And hey, I mean, you could win. That's kind of scary to think, like, you could catch fire. The screenplay could blow up on the competition. Everyone's talking about it and buzzing about it. And within a few months, your life could change like that, like literally like that. And that's the moment I can't wait for, is when we go to a writer and they win, and it's like they went from, dreaming about screenwriting and making movies to like, it's go time. Like, there's no better feeling than like going and ramping up pre-production and just zooming. Like, oh, I can't wait for that. So you got to try. And it's okay if you have questions, concerns. Like, we have an amazing like customer service, outreach. Like, email us. It goes to me and one of our members of our team will answer questions. We'll hop on a Zoom. We'll do a call. Like, whatever it is, we'll talk you through it. Awesome. We're here for you. I know what it's like. I understand what it's like. It's scary.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, John and Danny.
Thank you.
It was awesome to have you all on here and to talk about Billy Elliot and getting scripts made, what producers and creative executives look for in Kinolime. So be sure, if you want to apply to the contest or just check it out more, we have a link in the video description, and we hope that you'll give it a shot.
Send us your screenplays.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Send it. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Alexie. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, now we are in the Q&A section where we want to get to any of the questions that we couldn't slip in the middle.
Nice.
So let's go back up to the top. Here's one for Tommy. How do you present a project to a producer, I assume, if you want to direct it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you produce it yourself, and where do you find the money to do so?
Whew.
You've done this, John.
Questions today. I love that. So, okay, so if you want to direct it, I would say the strongest case for you to present would be to do some sort of short or concept piece to showcase your skills. I think I find the best movies, especially first-time writer-directors, is that they are writer-directors, right? What better vision can your story have than your own if you wrote it? Not saying everyone has a technical skill. I'm not saying every writer is a director, but if you want to direct it, do a short, do a concept piece, something to show them that you can do it. Or like just make the movie yourself. I'm yearning for the days of the 90s independent cinema. I was a little bit young for that, but the Kenny Burns, the Kevin Smiths, Robert Rodriguez, they just went out there and they just shot movies, and like the Duplass brothers. So they get it, especially nowadays, like get your phone and just make a movie. It's so there in front of you, and direct concept piece, I would say.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, to what Tom just said, I mean, verite filmmaking, like if you are not too akin to it, just look it up. There are amazing Tangerine's an exceptional film.
Yeah.
It's fully shot on a phone. So you can make something with no money if you really plan that and put your mind to it.
And then thoughts about scripts with anti-hero protagonists.
My favorite. Give me that. You talk about you said something about was it scarred white women or something? Or
white women in distress. Yeah.
Like give me like a dark protagonist that's like, I love those stories. I just love seeing I just love seeing flawed people navigate the world. So, I mean, yeah, like I would love to read those screenplays for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have nothing else really to add there. I love Batman. I love all that stuff. It's good fun, you know?
Yeah.
All right. And then, hi, Danny. Hi, John. Thanks for your time. Do you have an easy way of coping after a screenplay you've been working on for years is rejected over and over?
That's a great question. Coping after rejection. So the best thing, I don't think I would have to cope, but I would say a healthy technique would be to step away from it. I would say it doesn't mean that it's not good or you one day will fix it, but there is something about being too close to it for so long that you can't. I can't. Sometimes if I'm in a story too long, I can't see the flaws, and I got to step away. Write something else. Dive into something else. It's and you'll learn from what maybe went wrong in that project for the next one. And I would say the best thing to do is start another story after you've given it a bunch of cracks, let it breathe a bit, and then come back to it. I think Taika would leave a screenplay in a drawer for like a year or something, and then come back to it, or 6 months, 3 months. It's a long time because you got to step away. And then I would say just hop right back into the saddle onto something else, and make sure don't cry as much over the rejection. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, and I think the thing I've found a lot being a producer's assistant is like probably the single biggest attribute that differentiates a professional screenwriter from someone who writes screenplays or just wants to be one is their ability to churn things out quickly and not dwell on anything, right?
Yep.
You have 2 weeks to write this 60-page pilot. Okay. And they do it. Here is the unbelievable hill you must climb to maybe get something made. And they just do it and they move on to the next thing. So yeah, that's probably my best bet is just don't dwell on it and keep writing, because
Yes.
if you do take a big leap, that's what's going to be expected from you.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. Is it a bad idea to submit treatments for sale without a script to go with the treatment?
I mean, no, I don't think it's a bad idea. It just better be a really good treatment. Like it better be a fleshed out treatment that hums along and twists and turns, and you can see the story. Though I will say I don't know how you're gonna have to need a writing sample to go with that. I mean, unless you just sell the story idea to a producer. But no, I actually think treatment writing is a really interesting way to crack story. Instead of worrying about a 120-page screenplay and figuring it out, like write a short story, write a treatment. It'll force you to think in a box in a way that may help, jiggle things free on your story and your narrative and your character. But it's better be a really good treatment, to catch someone's attention for sure. But no, I wouldn't say it's a bad idea. Just, some writers actually have to get the treatment out first before the actual screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
I've only seen this once, in terms of like rooms and production offices I've been in, where it wasn't a treatment, it was just a concept pitch was pitched, and they said, yeah, go make that. It did not end well. There was a lot of confusion about what people were expecting.
Sure.
And what is this thing turning into? And so I guess it was not the smoothest ride at all to get the thing made. So I don't have a lot of experience in it, but my only time I've seen that happen successfully was kind of a complete disaster.
Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe it's something that's more common with like once you're established and like you have kind of a reputation to then be able to just go with the treatment. Sure. But if you're new, it's going to be hard to sell a treatment.
It'll be hard. you would need that screenplay to back up the writing ability, etc.
Yeah. Indra says, "What's the timeline to announce the winner?"
I actually don't know. If you go to our website, we have it up. I don't know because things have been a bit nebulous. We had to push back our submission period a month because we had so many writers email us saying, "Give us extra time. We're finishing up our last draft." So I think it's maybe 3 or 4 months out from April 4th. But I would say go to kinolime.com and check it out.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then I think this is the last question that I can see right now, which is, can we submit something that's more like a story timeline, true story?
The only things that we're accepting at the moment are feature-length screenplays. So unless the question is more about can they submit a screenplay based on a true story, I would say submit it to the first round, and then we can see what the audience says and we can gauge. But unless it's like you're writing about someone's famous and you need their life rights, then that I would say just message us and let's talk about it in more detail to give you a more specific answer.
Mm-hmm. And then questions are still pouring in. Can you submit more than one screenplay?
Yes.
Cool.
3 of them.
As many as you have, please send them.
I think we have a cap at 3.
Oh, really?
As many as you have, up to 3, send them.
Send 3, have your dog send, your
That's
next 3.
And then, well, this one's about the contest, so I'll bump to this one. Will we be notified about that later in the year submission? So I guess if you make an account on Kinolime's website, I'm sure you will get an email announcing when the next one comes up.
Yep. You'll get our list and we'll message all the fun info about the next one.
And then this will be the last question because I promised an hour and a half to you all, so I want to respect that. But is it possible for a writer to retain the rights to the IP of their story world while going through the process of getting a film made?
So that'll be up to the negotiations. If you won the screenplay, what happens then is it enters into standard practices. So just as in any other production company, if you were to, want to make a movie with Sony, Universal, a mini major, it's negotiations at that point. I can't speak to that because that'll be to what your attorney negotiates and how that works. But you will be treated as any other screenwriter and any other production, practices will have to engage in an option or a purchase of the screenplay, and you play out how it goes from there.
So basically, that just depends on in every situation. That just depends on the contract that you negotiate.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I don't want to speak to any legalities because I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but your attorney will be able to best guide you on that when it comes to that moment.
Yeah, that's definitely something that when I've signed contracts in the past, it's just that you have your own entertainment lawyer who goes through it and tries to get you the best deal possible, and they're trying to get the best deal possible, and it's different from case to case, where it's just kind of what can you get for this particular story at this particular time.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics on your story world. I know if you write something, they make a sequel, it's going to be based on your characters, but I don't know how this. I don't want to. Again, if this is a legal question about retaining rights, so I would say, when we get to that point, let's have a discussion. Let our attorneys speak,
But you're not signing up to have your whole world taken from you if you submit to the contest. No.
And you can back out at any time. Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. Well, I think that is everything that we got, and we will see you all next week. Thank you.
Oh my God. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everyone that tuned in. Appreciate it.
Yeah.